Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, Episode 60.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 60 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Today's sponsor is the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. So please head over to the show notes page for this episode. It's outoforderjameskalita.com/60. And we've put together some special promotions for supporting listeners. If you become a supporting listener through Patreon, you can get exclusive access to our members-only Facebook group and receive a special thank you message on the show. Today's guest is Janalee Tobias from Women's Against Gun Control. It is the oldest pro-gun female organization in the country, and we talk about a lot of things. And now, here's Janalee.
All right, I am back, and we'll start in 3, 2, 1. Janalee Tobias, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on your show. I'm
My
excited
pleasure.
to talk with you.
Oh, thank you. So, Janalee, you are the president and founder of Women Against Gun Control. Would you tell us a little about that group?
Sure. And at this point, I believe that Women Against Gun Control is the oldest pro-gun female gun rights organization in the world. And how it came to be is that, like in 1993, 1992, the debate was going on about the Brady Bill and guns and background checks. And I noticed that on a local level, my mayor, Dee Cordini, she was requiring background checks for Salt Lake City. And then on a national level, or I should say a state level, that my representative was a female, Karen Shepard, in Congress, and then on a state level, the Attorney General was a woman, Jan Graham, and they were all calling for more gun control. And on a national level, it's kind of interesting. The same people I've been fighting for over 20 years: Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein. Back then, it was Janet Reno and Sarah Brady. And they were all calling for more gun control, and they were saying that if we pass more gun control laws, that it will make us safer. And at that time, I had 2 young daughters, and when you become a parent, you're super sensitive about wanting to protect them. And so I just really wanted to believe that that protecting my kids would be as easy as and keeping them safe with just passing more gun control laws. So I began to research. I have a bachelor's degree in communications from Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And so I learned to do research, right, and understand concepts and to don't just take everything that you hear as fact. And so I researched, and I found out that exactly the opposite. What they were saying is that the more gun control laws that got passed would make you safer. Actually, the states that had the highest gun control laws had the highest rates of murders. So for an example, I remember the chart that kind of changed my life, and actually more than kind of changed my life, kind of sent me on a mission to, tell the world that gun control laws don't control crime, and it was the FBI, the Uniform Crime Report, and it had a list of the states that had the least amount of gun control laws and their murder rates. So, for example, Idaho had, which is my home state, by the way, I'm in Utah now, but Idaho had like a murder rate of 1 per 100,000, and Washington, D.C., which had the highest gun control laws, they had a murder rate of 80 per 100,000. And then I did research. At that time, the study that people quoted from was Gary Kleck with the University of Florida, and he had done research and determined that guns save, or they're used in defensive ways 2.5 million times a year. So I concluded that guns save lives. And then shortly after I started Women Against Gun Control, that was John Lott that came out with his book that said More Guns, Less Crime. And that had to do with concealed carry laws being passed in the states that were passing laws that allowed concealed carry, that they had less crime. And so I just started having rallies and lobbying the legislature. And I had young kids. You know how liberals use their kids as props? Well, I had my girls, I used as props, I guess you could say, just to show that, hey, all these women coming up here and saying, oh, I just got to protect my children. And I would say, how are you going to protect them? What, a baseball bat, mace or whatever. Do you understand the best way to protect your children is with a firearm? So that's basically how I started Women Against Gun Control. And I had no idea that when I just started going to meetings, and when you have children, you kind of get removed from the world a little bit. You're just so involved in taking care of them. And I started going to city council meetings and county council and making statements, and they started quoting me. And I'm like, wow, I feel like they care about my opinion. And then I was working on some other political campaigns at that time, gathering signatures, and one of them was for term limits. And so a reporter called to talk to me about term limits, why I was gathering signatures for term limits. And I explained that, which is, if the President of the United States serves 2 terms or 8 years in office, we need to be limiting them. And I think they get in office so long. And I know there's a lot of good ones that have been in office a lot of years, but the ones that get in office, they stay in office and they become part of the corrupt system. So, and then I just told the reporter, hey, by the way, I just started a group called Women Against Gun Control. So the next day he called me back, and I guess he told the editors at the Salt Lake Tribune, and they were intrigued by that because every single female in the state that had any political power was calling for more gun control laws. And so I ended up on the front page of the Salt Lake Tribune, and I wore a pink dress, and to show that, kind of break the stereotype that women who carry guns, they wear camo, maybe shoot a squirrel off their porch or something. I mean, I know it sounds kind of funny to say, but back in the day, I mean, that was, you probably remember that. I don't know how old you are or anything, but that was sort of the image that the media liked to portray of gun owners, that they were just, they had a gun in their sock, and they were just, just eager to go shoot things up. And so when reporters would come to my house to talk with me about guns, I would be baking bread or making cookies and just say, which is true, I need a gun to protect myself and my family.
Wow. That's one of the things I wanted to ask you is, like, in 1992 and 93, that wasn't so long ago, but the world is really a lot different. The mediums we use now to talk to people are a lot different, and I'm trying to imagine how I would have started an organization without the internet. And
are you asking me? I'd love to tell you.
Yeah,
I know,
yeah,
because
please.
right, it's really, oh my gosh, it was so much work, and plus I had young kids, and I decided, I had promising careers and a lot of job offers, and I always just knew that when I had kids that I wanted to be able to instill my values in them, and so I started with just making a lot of phone calls, and so I just, so the first thing I did is, I remember I had just been in a real serious car accident, and the mayor of Salt Lake, and there was a judge that had said that requiring waiting periods and background checks on guns was not against the Constitution. So it has been really handy, James, for me to have a degree in communications. If you know how to write and know how to write news releases and communicate your ideas, then you can be very effective. And so I just wrote a news release, and I just said, hey, I guess, that Mayor Didi Cordini and the judge, they flunked their Constitution class because clearly it says that the Second Amendment shall not be infringed. And then I held a news conference, and just me, little old me, and I called some gun store owners. And because what I remember thinking is that I was like, I know that Utah's a pro-gun state because it's mostly Republican, and it's the West, and we believe in self-sufficiency. And so I just remember thinking, where is everybody? Why aren't people standing up and making a statement about this? And so I thought, well, I'll say something. And so that's when I held this news conference, and I called some gun store owners, and the Salt Lake Tribune ran a column about it that morning, that there was going to be a news conference. And so a few people showed up, and every single media outlet in the state showed up, and I stood in front of City Hall, and I ripped Mayor Didi Cordini for not being able to understand to read, how she didn't know how to read, that kind of stuff. And so then I've still got like my notes. It's like I actually have pen and paper that I wrote down everybody's names on, and so we started calling people in the gun stores. And so then I would get on the phone, and I said, hey, let's have a rally. So we organized a rally, and to get people to come to rallies back in those days, I had to drive around flyers to all the gun stores, and again with my two little girls in tow. And I remember, like in Utah, it's in the fall, the weather's getting kind of bad and snowy, and went in the gun stores and posted flyers around the gun stores, and then I would and then back in those days too, it was the old phone trees is what we set up, phone trees for people to actually call on the phone and not text or Facebook to get them to come out. And so yes, very, very, very difficult to work to get people out, but somehow we made it work, and it happened. And so that movement just started. One principle that I learned in my classes at Brigham Young University, it was a persuasion class, and what they said was that there's this phenomena or just a concept, and it's called the spiral of silence. And that is, if you're sitting in a class and the professor is going on, and you're thinking like, no, I don't agree with that, and you're thinking, am I the only one person that thinks this way? And so once that person has the courage to stand up and say something, then others will stand with you. So that's why they call it the spiral of silence, because then it begins to spiral, and that is how you start grassroots movements and big movements, and it really does start with just one person speaking out. And so from that, then we started holding rallies, and getting people out to rallies those days was really hard. We couldn't just post it on social media, and so again, phone calls, and then there were a couple of radio talk show hosts that I called, and they were pro-gun, so they would advertise it. So in Utah, really, it's really interesting. I remember that there would be some hearings because at that time, before the Brady Bill was passed, each state was trying to pass like a patchwork of their own gun control laws. So, for example, if they passed tougher gun laws in Salt Lake City, then all anybody would have to do is go to the next surrounding city like Murray or West Valley City and buy a gun there, right? And so that was one of the laws that we started working on, was to make it so that you couldn't have a patchwork of gun control laws in a state, that they all had to be consistent. And so to pass that, then you have to go to hearings, and so people were driving from surrounding states in Utah, like Wyoming and Montana, and Idaho, by the way, and what they would tell us is that they were supportive of what Utah was doing, because they believed that if Utah fell, and if we started passing more gun control laws, and if we didn't preserve the Second Amendment, that Utah, because it's one of the reddest states in the nation, was the kind of the stronghold for conservatives. And so we got a lot of support from surrounding states. And again, that's when they would have to drive here, and I'd have to call them and have a long distance phone bill, and I on my own, my poor husband, right, like I was like, I wish you had a less expensive hobbies, like collecting jewelry or something. Because when you're a political activist, especially back in the day, printing up flyers got to be really expensive, and even just walking around neighborhoods and windshields, just any place that we could do to get the message out. Laundromats, payphones back in those days, even you could post flyers up there, in community bulletin boards, grocery stores, anywhere where there was a place to put a public notice. So we decided that we needed to pass a concealed carry law. So at that time, there were like 1,200 concealed carry permits in the state of Utah, and they were really hard to get. You could only get them if you had like a job as a security guard or something, and even then, it was really hard. So we started a grassroots swell of calling people, and in those days, by the way, we couldn't email our legislators. We had to call them on the phone, which is probably a little better, in fact, because there's something about face-to-face contact like we're having right now, or, at least phone-to-phone contact, where they can be, you can persuade somebody, I think, a little better on the telephone. So at one of those rallies that we had, there was a gentleman who showed up at the rally, and his name was Mike Holmes, and he waited to talk to me, and he told me, my name is Mike Holmes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally know who you are. And in 1988, I was 7 months pregnant with my first child, and it just hit me because I was pregnant, and his wife was 7 months pregnant with their fourth child, and they had gone into a video store in Salt Lake. And I mean, that's an archaic term, isn't it, too? Video store?
Right, yeah.
Do you know what one is? I'm not sure how old you are.
I do, yeah, I remember. I'm 42 now, so yeah.
Oh, I've got you beat by quite a ways. Heck, I'll just tell you, I'm 55. So that's what people used to do, is go to the video stores. And so she had her 3 girls, and she was pregnant with her 4th daughter. And they went to a video store, like they had sleepovers, and her husband was away at a Boy Scout camping outing, and a guy came in and in front of her 3 daughters shot her in the head and killed her in front of her 3 daughters. And so they rushed her to the hospital, and her 4th baby was born blind and had seizures and died 2 years later. And so I remember just screaming. Sorry, I just got emotional all of a sudden. That was weird, because it affected everybody so much. Everybody, I think, has a point in their life when they realize that we live in a really evil world. But we don't let it ruin our spirit. We still, we be nice to people still. So that was like the media had gotten there before even the police officer, and because and so. It was just a huge media story for days, and so the people, they tried to start talking about more gun control laws then. So I'd only seen Michael Holmes on TV and followed his story with great interest. And so he said, "Hey, it's been 7 years since my wife died, and it's time for me to make a statement." And he said, "I believe if somebody would have had a concealed weapon in that video store, they could have saved my wife's life." And so he said, I'm ready to talk to the legislature about this. And it was really hard for him, and he told me that that media would literally camp out on his front lawn, and try to get him to make a statement against against guns, and like pro gun control. And so it was really emotional for me to hear his story. And since, Utah is a Mormon state, I mean, we're not, like, it might only be 50-50 Mormon now, but the headquarters are here. And so you might find this interesting to know how he dealt with this in actually a very successful way, in that, I mean, that his children have been able to deal with it. And that is one of the Mormon apostles at that time. It was Thomas Monson, who later became a Mormon prophet, and he died last year. But because it was such a high-profile murder, and because Mike Holmes had been at a Mormon Boy Scout camping trip, he had a meeting with him, and he told him, "You need to forgive your wife's killer, and if you don't forgive, the killer will take down." Wow, sorry. I haven't told this story for a while, and Thomas Monson. Wow, sorry. He's dead now, and I just remembered, like how emotional everything was. So he worked really hard on that, and so he gave his girls got blessings. They call them priesthood blessings, so that they would be able to forgive and not let this ruin their lives. So when he said it was time to make a statement, it was a huge deal in the state of Utah. And 2 years, we had been pushing for concealed carry for about 2 years before that, and so we were having a hard time getting traction. Does that sound weird in the state of Utah? Like, because we're almost like too pro-gun now. You can almost go too far. Like it sounds weird not to be too pro-gun. It's just that you have to strike a balance between public relations with people who are still afraid of guns, is what I'm trying to say. And so Utah at that time was really not all that pro-gun, and so we even had to convince like Republicans and a lot of people, and that's what Women Against Gun Control, like what we worked on was showing that guns are mainstream for women who want to protect their families. And so it started in 1993, 94, and in 1995 was when Michael Holmes got involved, and so I worked with him a lot, and just talking with him, and he had his wife's dead wife's brother would help him with speeches and stuff, and so when it came to testify to get concealed carry passed, he testified at the legislature. It was extremely difficult for him, and you could have heard a pin drop. And we passed concealed carry. And I remember that one of the Democrat majority leader told me that it was Mike Holmes, that he had actually voted for concealed carry because of what Mike Holmes said. And I know I have a speech somewhere in my files. I know I could dig it out and find it. But I remember that one of the things that he said was that putting a no guns allowed sign was a note of encouragement for criminals. And so when Utah got concealed carry passed, it was very significant because Utah has been kind of a model for the nation. And a lot of people from other states come to Utah to get their concealed carry permit because it is reciprocal with other states if you get a concealed carry permit in Utah. So that took me back down memory lane, and that it was really, you know, something stick with you for a long time, and to remember, and really, if even a bigger lesson is to be learned here, it's forgiveness. Because I don't know how you could. I don't know if I could, James. Because can you imagine? The love of his life. It was the love of his life. They were high school sweethearts, and he told me that when he came up for parole, that because he had treated. Sometimes you see these trials, and you see the victims, which they have every right to sit and scream at the person who killed their family member, and they'll say, "I hate you," rotten heck, you mother effer, and Mike told me that he treated his wife's killer with dignity and respect. And by the way, his wife's killer was a Mormon. And just to give you a couple more details, by the way, their daughters, back in those days, women wore in their hair, if you had long hair, what they called banana clips. And so the banana clips are what we put our hair in. And their daughters had found a piece of their mom's skull and hair in a banana clip. That's how traumatic it was for his daughters. And so when his wife's killer came up for parole, he denied it. He said, "I don't deserve parole." So maybe somewhere again in those lessons that we learn is that if we somehow, if we're not bitter and angry, and of course you're going to be bitter and angry, but it was because he felt like it's because he wasn't a raving maniac to his wife's killer, that he respected that, and he knew that all the damage that he had done to that family, and so he denied parole. He denied himself parole. Wow, sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about that today. It was just kind of went that way. Sorry. Woo.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, do you have advice for women that might be thinking about starting their own paths in activism now?
For women against gun control, yes, and really like the really embarrassing thing for me is that, it grew so fast, and I've been volunteering my time, and I'll do it. I'll gladly volunteer my time and do these things, and it's just that it was growing so fast I couldn't keep up with it. And then as we've witnessed with Donald Trump, when you get to be too persuasive and too powerful, a lot of people go after you. So I tried to save some open space, and which I was successful at here in South Jordan, by the Jordan River, and I did another, again, before Facebook and social media, started a huge grassroots movement on preserving open space by the river, because one of my deal. So for my advice for women, I've always maintained that guns do not cause crime, and so if we work on things in the community, like forgiveness, for example, that can stop crime. And so I believe, I'm a country girl from Idaho, and studies have shown that having urban open space, and nature is a place where you can go and be healed, and so I practice what I preach, and I set out to save some open space, and I ticked off a lot of really power developers, and they sued me for $1.7 million and told me to keep my mouth shut, and that if I just kept my mouth shut, that they would drop the lawsuit against me. So it's kind of this weird thing, like I started attracting a lot of liberals and environmentalists, and so, but because of that, it kind of harmed I couldn't, it's complicated, but I was just completely buried in legal paper, and I said, no, I'm not going to keep my mouth shut. And in fact, they say you'll have to pry my guns from my cold dead fingers. So I told the people suing me, you'll have to pry my free speech from my cold dead voice box. And so I won a major free speech case. It was 9 years of litigation and cost me $400,000 in legal bills. And but when you fight for rights, there's no money in lawsuits, and people know that. And they, lawsuits are used as a weapon to get people to shut up and all kinds of things. But so for any cause, if it's guns, I am stepping back. More time I'm going to be devoting to women against gun control, and so start a chapter of women against gun control in your state, and we have lots of really awesome like women against gun control products that I need to get back online and selling it. Dog tags, T-shirts. I believe that the women against gun control logos are the best female gun rights logos out there, and there's a lot of copycats. And I'll give credit to the men who believe, the graphic arts artists that early on believed in what I was doing, and they volunteered their time to make the logo. The first one, it's a little gun in a purse. That was designed by one of the state's top graphic artist designers. And then, about 5 years ago, there was a guy that wanted to sign another logo, and it's the silhouette of a woman that says "Ladies of High Caliber." And what I like about that is that there's even been some kind of copycats of that one now, but she's not real skinny, it's kind of interesting that women against gun control, I coined the phrase, ladies of high caliber. And so that has a lot of meaning in that we don't use sex to sell gun rights. We're ladies of high caliber, and what that means is that we're a cut above. And being a woman of high caliber might mean a lot of different things to a lot of people, but to me, it's the values that I grew up with and the values that everybody grew up with back in the day, where I like to say a lady always keeps her weapons concealed, right? And so meaning that, we dress modestly and we respect men, and we understand that we're more than our bodies, and that we have minds, and that we can do more. We don't have to be men to be powerful. So for an example, back in the day, 25 years ago, I was, I probably could have posted some of those naughty gun and girl pictures, but when I had the offers, I never did that. And back in that day, I don't know if if you're 42, you might. Do you remember Gordon Liddy? He was a talk show host, and he was pro-gun, and he made these calendars called Stacked and Packed, and they were girls in, did really disgusting poses with big guns, and it didn't put your mind in a good place. And when you'd walk into somebody's office, there were women with their hardly anything on with big guns, and I think that's trashy. If guys like it, whatever, I get it, they're guys or whatever, but I made the decision not to do that, and not to use sex to sell gun rights, but to use our real power in women is being feminine, and not sex, but even maybe call it sexuality, in that we're different from men. And it's interesting because a college professors, I used to put my webpage in college textbooks, and if I could, I can paraphrase what they did, but they said, so here's these liberal professors, right, and they're supposed to think that conservative women are just nutso or whatever, or like prudes or whatever, and they said that Women Against Gun Control shows that women can be sexy and fierce and sexy while defending their family. And so Women Against Gun Control has always had the policy that we be sexy by what's in our mind and how we treat people and how we understand that guns are a defense weapon and not an offense weapon, and that guns are only to be used in self-defense. And so that was that the Women Against Gun Control pledge is that that you believe in the right to in the Second Amendment that you'll fight to protect the Second Amendment, that you promise to only use guns in self-defense. So I encourage them. They're welcome to start their own female gun rights group, but give me a month or two and let me put out some little fires. I always have like a million fires because I'm a target, and I'm a volunteer, and I need to clone myself, but I also have been involved in fighting tax increases. I beat back some tax increases. Here's something for you. Well, I think I left a message that Sacha Baron Cohen just added me to his list of people that have been duped, along with Sarah Palin and Dick Cheney, and very powerful people. So I guess I should feel flattered that he thinks I'm a powerful enough of a voice that he did everything in his power to destroy me. And I don't know, when I realized I was being punked, and I didn't know who it was, I just knew that when he asked me to sing songs, that he would put guns inside of stuffed animals, and sing songs about, like, if you're happy and you knew it, if you're happy and you know it, shoot your gun, bang bang, and inside of an Uzi, a unicorn, an Uzi inside of a stuffed unicorn, and he called it an Uzicorn, and he kept telling me, see, guns aren't scary. Tell the boys and girls, it was under the guise of teaching a gun safety class, tell the boys and girls, Janalee, that I say Janalee because it was for he told me it was for Israeli TV, and that he was with the Israeli Mossad. So Janalee, pet that pretty unicorn, tell the children, Janalee, like, guns are not dangerous. And I would go, no, guns are dangerous, guns are scary. And he even had the ammunition that he would, the first one he brought out was puppy pistol, and the ammunition was colored to look like Crayola crayons. And and so I said, I looked at that and I go, what? And he goes, Janalee, show the children the pretty bullets. And I go, no, I don't think that's a good idea. You shouldn't be making kids think that bullets are as harmless as crayons. No, Janalee, like, psychologists, they've approved this program, believe me. And he goes, I want you to tell the children to pick up the bullets and tell them, look at the pretty yellows and the greens. And then he would say, all you do is, when I say he made me, he did make me. Like, I was completely being manipulated and put into a situation where, I'm in a room of 15 people. They're all actors acting like this is a serious gun safety program. And so he go, you just load the puppy, you put the puppy food in, puppy pistol, and then you just tickle the tummy, and the puppy food comes out, and the bad guy's going to take a nap. And he did that with had a Mach 4 stuffed inside of a bunny gun, he called it, and then the magazine was painted to look like carrots. And I objected the entire time and I kept telling, like, no, guns are dangerous. You shouldn't confuse little kids to make them think that guns are as safe and cuddly as stuffed animals, because they're not. And he just kept, like, everything. No, you don't understand, Janalee. This in Israel, we have to do this because, the terrorists are always coming, so we need to arm they called it the kindergarten program. And then he even brought out like a 50 caliber fully automatic. I think it was a Browning 50 caliber, and put that inside of a dinosaur, and he called it the Dino gun. And he would say things, okay, tell the boys and girls, Janalee, the bad guys come. They're going to take your candy, so you got to shoot them. No, you don't shoot people for taking your candy. So it was just like he just kept trying to trip me up. So when I realized what had happened, I immediately canceled my contract. I said, you don't have my permission to use my image in any way at all. And I go, like you want to see me fight? You haven't seen nothing yet. And they knew I was a fighter. There's, lots been written about like my lawsuits and things that I get involved with. So I found out that another high-ranking gun rights activist, Philip Van Cleve, with Virginia Citizens Defense League, had also been duped. And so we sent out a warning. This was back in February. We didn't know who was doing it, and then we just recently found out. I'm sure you've heard, right, by now that Sacha Baron Cohen has been, for a year, he's been going undercover in an attempt to make conservatives look like complete idiots. So I'd like to think that we had an impact by warning people, and I canceled my contract, and I told them you cannot use my image. So far, I've been lucky. There's been 3. There's going to be 7 episodes, and there's been 3 episodes of, it's a show called Who's America on Showtime. And every week he destroys more and more lives, and he doesn't care who he destroys, and he gets off on it. It's not like Candid Camera where it's a joke, like you do silly gags, and then you tell them right afterwards, Candid Camera. So for me, I have all the letters I've written. I wrote to their producers and their attorneys and detailed lists, and all this time I've been thinking that I have upset Israeli Mossad, because they told me that Benjamin Netanyahu wanted this gun safety program and that they wanted to arm toddlers and kindergartners. And so I remember I wrote in one of my letters, I go, should I be concerned that I've just ticked off the Israeli Mossad? Seriously,
yeah.
I mean, that's what I've been living with since February, thinking that they're going to come after me. I mean, now I'm just, Sacha Baron Cohen's going to come after me, but it's what happens, and I'm really I'm kind of just like the nice Mormon mom that makes cookies for the neighbors. I'm the Kool-Aid mom. People come here to get treats. I'm just a nice person, and somehow I've managed to tick off a lot of high-profile people. So the message here for any woman, since you specifically mentioned females, I say that a mom with a mouth is more powerful than a mom with a magnum. So I say that about anybody. A woman with a mouth is more powerful than a magnum. A man with a mouth or a megaphone or a microphone is more powerful than a magnum. And that is because Shakespeare said it first, that the pen is mightier than the sword. That's why the First Amendment is the First Amendment. That's why I fought for 9 years and put everything, almost lost my house, every single spare penny we had. We went without so many things for 9 years so that I could pay lawyers to fight for the right to free speech, and we won a major free speech case, and we got a law passed at the Utah legislature that protects citizens who are fighting against abusive lawsuits. They're called strategic lawsuits against public participation, and state by state, they're slowly passing laws against these types of abusive lawsuits. So sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I should just be like all the other moms or all the other women, like I'll go hang out at the mall. I don't know. Well, actually, I'll hang out on Amazon, right? Do people go to the mall anymore? Or just like paint my fingernails or whatever, and just worry about my own self and my own family. But I don't believe, for me, I can't do that. If that's what other people are comfortable with, then that's okay. But for me, I can't sit back when I know that millions of people have shed their blood for me so that I could be free. And the biggest part of protecting that freedom is the right to own guns.
Well, Janalee, thank you. I always ask my guests if there are books they recommend that all gun owners should read. Any come to mind?
Yeah, I would love it. If I was interviewed for 4 years by one of Utah's best investigative journalists. His name is Paul Swenson, and the name of the book is called Slapped. It's called Slapped, Slapped! Exclamation point. A novel based on a true story by Paul Swenson. You can buy it on Amazon or several other websites on the internet. If you just Google that, or you'll find a lot of references. But I think that it's displayed the best on Amazon. But in that book, it's very much, since gun rights has been part of my life since the early 90s, that was very much figured into my lawsuit, trying to protect free speech. And so, so you asked me how do people get involved? That book is it reads like a novel, and he's a very, very good writer. So it's entertaining. It makes you laugh. It makes you cry. If you want to know what Mormons are really like and not all the weird stuff out there, read the book. I'm Mormon. I'm a Mormon housewife trying to, fight the corrupt politicians in the state who are always trying to destroy me. And then there's also a website that tells the story about the real story of the book. It's slapsuit.org, which is slappsuit.org. And I'm all about what can we do to, stop crime. There's a book that I wrote called The Raspberry Man, and it's a true story about being nice to people. It's a man in my life who I adopted as my grandpa, and he had a big raspberry patch, and how he never had any children, and he adopted me for his little, what did he call me? My best little girl. He was from Denmark. And so my great niece, so it's my sister's granddaughter, she has autism, and she illustrated it. So, and it's like she's an angel, like straight out of heaven, my great niece who illustrated the book. And the reviews on Amazon got real ugly last week when somebody found out that I had written this book, and one of my haters got on there and said that I was a racist. And it upset me because I've worked really hard to keep The Raspberry Man to be non-political because of my niece who has autism. And I told her, hey, your great Aunt Jan it's political, and I said I would never want you to be hurt by any of my political views. And it's like, no, I love you, Aunt Jan, and so it breaks my heart that somebody went and gave me a really hateful review about The Raspberry Man on Amazon. I can take it. I've taken about every kind of abuse now there is to take, but to do that to an angel from heaven with autism who has a beautiful gift of being an artist is really the great lengths that people have gone in our country where they don't respect anybody and anything. They didn't even read the book. They just hated me. And so it destroyed, in its wake, really an angel. I mean, it didn't destroy her, but I'm upset about it. I don't want her to know about it, So those two books, The Raspberry Man by Janalee Tobias and Slapped, a novel based on a true story by Paul Swenson. In the book, I'm Jessica Tobler, and it's 99% true. Most of the names have been changed of the major characters, and I'm the blonde on that's a real picture of me, even though my name was changed. But that was the blonde on the front cover, me trying to save the river bottoms from development.
Wow. Okay. Great. Well, I thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find you online?
Okay. Online, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. That's what I've always said. So there's several women against gun control Facebook groups. There's a huge one that's women against gun control, and then there's that one's actually not mine, but I'm glad it's on there. I don't care who gets the credit. we're all, to send the message, and then there's other 2 or 3 other. I need to make one of them public, but Women Against Gun Control Facebook sites, the website that needs to be updated, and that's a whole another story. I've told them like what I want to have done, it never got done. So, but that it's WAGC.com for WomenAgainstGunControl.com, and I know that the contact links for the email works because that's how Sacha Baron Cohen contacted me. I get a lot of media requests through that website. I think that's how you contacted me too,
Yep.
right? Through the WAGC.com.
Correct. Yep. All right. Great. Well, I will put those on the show notes page, and I thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me on. So I didn't mean to get emotional, but I didn't. That was unexpected, but you can tell it's really a very emotional part of my life, and just thinking about how far the world has gone downhill, and thinking about Mike Holmes, and just I don't know. Anyway, but I appreciate that. You just kind of reconfirmed in my mind today, being able to talk about this, how passionate I really am about preserving the Second Amendment and forgiving people, and using just the morals that made our country strong since beginning of time is what we need to do.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. The show notes page for today is Out of Order James Kalita /60, and you'll find links to Women Against Gun Control and the books we talked about today. And wanted to remind you guys, NJ SafeCon is coming up, so head over to njsafecon.net or to the show notes page for information. Out of Order James Kalita. We'll see you next time.